We're going to talk today about Lonerbox again. The reason we're going to do so is he has this whole stream devoted to me, half of a stream devoted to me, that I am a liar, that I'm unserious. So the streamer says I'm unserious, whereas Mike Spagat, one of the premier world experts, an economist with PhD from Harvard in the accounting of casualties in war, says my analysis of the civilian to combatants killed ratio in Gaza is the best at hand. Regardless, we'll address the substance. We won't demean Lonerbox with appeals to authority of Mike Spagat and so on. We'll talk about the charges Mr. Box has made against me. There are 4 specific claims. So the first claim Lonerbox makes is that I'm misrepresenting Israel's position in Operation Cast Lead by saying that they counted all police killed in that operation as combatants. And I have said that, and I'm right. Lonerbox is simply confused here. He notices that in its justifications for attacking police in Cast Lead, Israel said that the overwhelming majority of police were in other militant groups. So that was a big argument they made. And what he's inferring from this is that Israel's making a proportionality argument. They were saying it was justified to bomb the police station because most of them were combatants. By the way, I don't accept that the overwhelming majority were combatants. Maybe a slight majority were, but that's neither here nor there. Let's just go with Israel's argument that the overwhelming majority were for argument's sake. He's not understanding the argument properly from Israel. Israel is not arguing that the police are mostly combatant. Israel's arguing that, like Al-Qassam, the whole frickin' police as an institution is a militant group and all members can be targeted. That is what Israel argued. They simply use the overlap in membership between the police and other militant groups as a piece of evidence that the police in and of themselves are a militant group and can all be targeted. So Lonerbox simply confused a supporting premise of Israel's argument that the police are a militant group, and that supporting premise was that most police are in other militant groups, with the conclusion that the police are in fact a militant group. So he's confusing a supporting premise with the conclusion. And here we see the Israeli foreign minister, in responding to Cast Lead, arguing categorical terms that police can be targeted and that police casualties should not be considered civilian casualties. So again, the charges again are not that I'm wrong, but I'm unserious and lying for saying these things. And I'm actually correct, which is pretty remarkable. If you're going to say someone is so wrong that they must be acting in bad faith and lying, and they end up being right, that's rather awkward. And you know who else is apparently a liar or dishonest or not to be taken seriously? B'Tselem, because they agree with my position. As this gentleman, the international advocacy lead for the group, said in our email exchange, the police, considered combatants by Israel. We know that because they were all deliberately targeted. If you're intentionally targeting a group of people, you're either committing murder, which I don't believe Israel was, for the record, in this operation, or you were considering them all combatants. This wasn't collateral damage. They targeted them deliberately, and so they considered all of them to be combatants and counted them as such in their public casualty estimates. So on this issue of the police, I'm correct and Mr. Box is wrong. The second example Lonerbox gives of my alleged duplicity is that I dismiss his propaganda a mere Amit study, really an Israeli government study. This is a branch of the Israeli government. It's called an Israeli IDF study on combatants killed at the Great March of Return, Meir, if you want to call it that. I dismiss this as propaganda, and Lonerbox claims the study is relatively accurate in its assessment of combatants killed. He defends this study. The first issue, I understand Lonerbox's confusion. He's confusing a supporting premise of the argument with its conclusion. Here, I'm just flabbergasted by his dehumanization of Gazans. This Meir Amit study, so-called, blatantly says civilians are combatants. Civilian affiliates of Hamas, PIJ, Fatah, and so forth, they're combatants. And it says this by labeling them as terrorists. This is the move Meir Amit or Israel makes to generate a bogus count of combatants killed, that the large majority killed are combatants. If Lonerbox encountered a document on October 7th that labeled members of Likud or Ben-Gurion's party or Smotrich's party as combatants, he would dismiss this as barbarism, rightfully, as justification for murder. But here it's okay because it's just not in his consciousness, the suffering of Palestinian and Gazan civilians. When I watched his video, I got confused at one point. He was insinuating that terrorists doesn't mean combatants. Is that what you're saying? That if they call them terrorists, it doesn't mean combatants? Does terrorists mean civilians? Does it mean unsure, that they're not sure how to classify them? I don't understand what you're saying here. I mean, my inference is that when they call them in multiple documents terrorists, they mean that they're combatants. And that's why they're combatants count as bunk. There are other reasons, but that's the big reason. Am I misunderstanding this? You don't think terrorist means combatants? Explain this to me. Again, the second claim is just completely erroneous. I'm apparently a liar or just too biased to be taken seriously because of my attacks on this study. I attack the study because it labels civilians as combatants if they are so-called affiliates of political parties. I'm just condemning murder here. I'm condemning misrepresentation, condemning justification for murder when I attack the study as propaganda. I'm not being dishonest or tendentious. And before we move on, I'm going to just provide another illustration of how dishonest Lonerbox is. He claims that I dismiss just dogmatically any evidence that people listed on Al-Qassam websites that a person is a martyr as evidence. I just dismiss all of these claims.
And they have this for every single person. And this fucking scum of the earth liar will say that, oh, these are just random people. These are just random people randomly claimed and photoshopped or whatever else. They have videos of them training.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
They have little montages. Oh, this is totally them. This is just them putting a Hamas flag on a random civilian. History speaks. You fucking moron. Look at this. You're just burying your head in the sand because you can't. He can't cope with the fact that the UN reports are less accurate than Israeli intel reports, both for the Cas Led, for the police deaths, and for this. He can't do it. He's not allowed. It's illegal.
My position on this, which I've made clear to you repeatedly, is that some of them are legitimate, some of them are not. There is a practice of these militant groups claiming martyrs erroneously so that the family gets money and they get prestige. But of course, it doesn't mean every entry on their site is erroneous. Most are real. And I've made this clear. So it's just more dishonesty, total straw man. And he's trying to make me look like I'm just dogmatic, impervious to evidence, and it's unfair. So the third claim of dishonesty against me is that I misrepresented Lonerbox's justification for the killing of a 15-year-old boy in the Great March of Return. I actually did misrepresent his position. I didn't do so out of dishonesty, but sloppiness. I based it on a clip that was taken out of context, which I saw on X. Shouldn't have done it. My fault. You gotta own these things when you fuck up like this. I publicly corrected myself and apologized to him right when I realized my mistake. But even here, where it's up to me to take an L, right? That's what I should be doing here. Lonerbox refuses to let me take an L. He has to lie about this. He has to pretend that he pulled out teeth to get me to apologize or concede error, that I wasn't willing to admit and correct. He's just lying here. He literally talked to me about this once on air. And immediately when he raised this, I said, okay, I'll look into this. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. That's what I do.
Okay, so somebody may have sent me an out of context
okay,
clip.
but you're complaining here about...
No, not may have. They did, and you believed it.
Yeah,
it's okay, though. I don't even fucking mind. It's just like...
If I did that, then I'm wrong. I'm sorry about that. So Destiny's position was definitely, which I remember clearly, that the 14-year-old 8th grade girl who attacked the fence can be murdered.
So that was Destiny's conversation I have with you turns into, let's talk about Destiny.
He's just
but
sexy.
if this is let me make a point.
Wait,
if
can I ask
this
you
is misrepresenting...
Okay, wait, can I just ask a question?
Let me make a point, because
Can I just ask a question so I can see what's going on?
Yeah, let him talk first.
There's a little bit of a delay. You gotta. When there's a delay, you have to keep talking for 2 seconds.
If this is, I didn't remember this because it was such a quick tweet because I just listened to this clip, like the Destiny one I thought about. That's why I didn't mention this. If this is actually, I'll look into this, and if this is inaccurate, I'll delete it and I'll apologize. I'll say that
I was not stubborn about this. The second I took the time to watch his stream, which was soon after our interaction, I apologized and conceded error. So he's lying when he says that he had to pull teeth and that I was unwilling to concede this. When I realized this, I'm like, shit, this was an out of context clip. Fuck the person who put this together. I have to apologize. This is embarrassing, but I've got to do it. That's what I did. So I don't understand why admitting error, do you want me to run away from the internet forever? I mean, what am I supposed to do? I admitted my mistake. I apologized. There's nothing really more I can do. So I did misrepresent Lonerbox's rationale for killing the 15-year-old. He said he justified this on the basis of what he thinks is the fact that the kid was in PIJ. I think this is a really flimsy argument. I don't think there's any credible evidence that the kid actually was a PIJ militant. And I'll include a tweet where I go into detail about this in the notes section of the YouTube video here. Fourth charge Lonerbox makes against me is that I'm lying and not to be taken seriously because I say Ben-Gurion ordered or approved the Qibya Massacre.
It is not Ben-Gurion specifically ordered the massacre and told Sharon to do maximum killing. The order changed. the words of the order had changed as they went down from the central command to the units.
This again is very strange. He's saying I'm lying about my interpretation of historical evidence. I'm not lying. This is what I believe is the balance of evidence. You can disagree, but I have evidence for my views in this regard, and I'll share them here. The massacre was ordered essentially as a reprisal measure against Fedayeen attacks on Israelis. The idea is you kill civilians, you make them suffer in order to deter further Fedayeen attacks. According to Benny Morris, on the morning of 13 October 1953, Ben-Gurion, along with Lavon, Macliffe, and Moshe Dayan, approved an attack on a civilian community, namely the village of Qibya, as a reprisal measure. And the order was conveyed by Ben-Gurion and these other three guys, Lavon, Macliffe, and Dayan, to the operations department in the general staff branch. We don't know the specific language Ben-Gurion, Dayan, and all these other guys used when they conveyed the order to the general staff, but the order from the general staff, which then conveyed it to the lower ranks, has been found. They ordered Sharon's at Unit 101 to destroy houses, and they also ordered the hitting or harming of civilians. This is the Morris's translation. I don't know Hebrew. But hitting or harming of civilians. The order changes, as Morris notes, as it goes further down the chain of command. It changes from harming or hitting civilians to maximum killing. That's the language of central command. Lonerbox uses this change in language to argue that Ben-Gurion didn't order a massacre, that the order was given by rogue subordinates. And I'm lying or whatever when I say Ben-Gurion did give the order. So his argument appeals to the change in language. Again, they first say when it's at the higher level, the general staff who talk directly to Ben-Gurion and his other guys, they say hitting or harming civilians, and then it says maximum killing when it gets one level lower. However, my view is that, for the reasons they'll say, harming and hitting was just euphemisms for killing, that the order actually didn't. Maybe it changed in terms of the level of killing. The 69 people were killed. Maybe they wanted to kill 10 or 5 fewer, but they intended to kill. As I said, Moshe Dayan was one of the guys who, together with Ben-Gurion, formulated the order for the Qibya action. Dayan discussed, before it happened, with Sharon, a plan to kill the civilians of the village. That Dayan was talking with Sharon about killing civilians is evidence that the original order was one for massacre. Because remember, Dayan made this order with Ben-Gurion. This is evidence that the interpretation of Central Command was correct. They didn't go rogue, they were just using more explicit languages. In fact, the only way you'd believe this, that they went rogue, is if you believe Dayan also went rogue, because he's discussing killing with Sharon. He's not just discussing destroying houses or whatever the Hezbollah version of this is. Interestingly, and this may be a point for Lonerbox's interpretation, while planning with Sharon the massacre of civilians in Qibya, Dayan also suggests that Sharon could just destroy the houses and expel the villages. So they're talking about killing, they're talking about murder, but Dayan mentions you can kill them, the civilians, or you can just expel them. Sharon opts for the murderous route. One could say maybe Ben-Gurion and Dayan didn't order it. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe they sanctioned it. They sanctioned killing of civilians. I think ordering is much more plausible, and moreover, it's obvious that permission was given to kill civilians. After the massacre happened, Ben-Gurion privately expressed approval of it, and he effusively praised Sharon in a personal meeting between the two men, which Sharon talks about in his memoir. He describes the massacre Ben-Gurion does as something that will help the Israelis live in peace in the region, with, I guess, the idea being because they did this horrible thing, this will help deter future attacks on them, on their own civilians by Fedayeen. Ben-Gurion also told his cabinet that while he knew nothing about the attacks on Qibya or any attack on Qibya, so he's lying here. He says he knows nothing about it. He made the decision for the attack. He also says he would have approved of the massacre had he known about it. This is key. So he's lying about his lack of knowledge, but he's saying, I would have approved of it if I knew. To me, this is a hint that he did, in fact, know. That this isn't some shocking thing. This isn't some happy coincidence. He did know, and he's kind of hedging by, I didn't engage in the murder, but I approve of it. So he's kind of trying to take credit for it without implicating himself. Another important thing here is no one was punished or chastised for the massacre. And this includes Central Command. So the Central Command changed the language of the order to maximal killing from harming or hurting civilians. And they weren't punished, they weren't chastised, nothing. Another piece of evidence that the Qibya massacre was not just a matter of subordinates going rogue, but a top-down policy of massacre is a 1954 remark by Lavon to the general staff. Lavon mentions Qibya as an example of the greatest and most successful military operation that turns into a political failure, right? So it's a great military option, it turns into a political failure, and then it becomes a military failure because of the political failure. Recall that Lavon was one of the people with Ben-Gurion, Moshe Dayan, and Macliffe who formulated the order for an attack on Qibya, right? And the order was conveyed to the general staff. Why on earth would Lavon tell the general staff that Qibya was one of the greatest and most successful military operations if it was a case of rogue soldiers countermanding his orders? Why is it so successful if rogue soldiers are doing this massacre, as Lonerbox apparently thinks? It doesn't make any sense. My conclusion, based on the balance of evidence, is that Ben-Gurion, Moshe Dayan, these other guys, gave an order to massacre, and that the order never changed in its essence. Okay, perhaps Lonerbox disagrees with me, and he thinks Central Command went rogue, ordered a massacre behind Ben-Gurion's back. Ben-Gurion happens to love it after it happens, but didn't approve of it originally. Okay, fine. And by the way, I got an email exchange with Benny Morris, and he admitted there's no evidence Ben-Gurion didn't know. I think he said, I assume he didn't know, but he admits we don't have evidence of his ignorance. But to me, this is just, I don't want to get in a tangent with Morris, but this is a case where he's a very good historian, but whenever there isn't clear documentary proof implicating Israel in crimes, or especially very important figures, Israeli figures, he just says, who knows? I do think that this is an expression of Morris's bias. I don't think he's written about this in print. And also it seems to contradict some of the things he's written in print, what he said in an email exchange with me, because he says the government ordered it in print, but then maybe I'm reading too much into that. Regardless, Lonerbox can agree with Morris. I'm not lying. I'm just giving my interpretation based on the evidence. I believe Ben-Gurion, absolutely believe Ben-Gurion gave the order for a massacre, for murder. And I think the case is robust for this. I get things wrong. I could be wrong. We can argue, but there's room for good faith disagreement. And this points to the overall issue with Lonerbox. He has this Nuance Broing persona, but then I'm a charlatan, I'm a liar for reasonable and thought-provoking positions that are evidenced. And yet Destiny, who bases his whole view of the war being the most civilian protecting ever, 9 months into it or 10 months into it, whatever he did the stream on a John Spencer op-ed, charlatan John Spencer, who doesn't know extremely rudimentary things about military history, the average rate of civilians killed in war and urban war. That's not bad faith, but I'm apparently bad faith. I've got more than one DM saying that I'm defaming Ben-Gurion. People are mad at me for defaming Ben-Gurion by saying that he ordered the massacre. Even if you, again, in my view, implausibly believe he didn't order the massacre, the guy brought the accusation on himself by repeatedly praising it, praising the chief murderer, Sharon, saying he would have given the order had he known about it. Again, he lied that he didn't know there was an operation of any kind. He lied about this repeatedly. He lied about his role in it. He's acting extremely guilty. In all of these cases, Lonerbox is either wrong, probably wrong, or still being dishonest, even in the case where I did misrepresent his position. And I think this shows that he's not an honest actor. He has an extreme bias in favor of pro-Israel content and creators like Destiny, and an equally passionate bias against good faith, hard-hitting, informed, Mike Spaggett-endorsed, Israel-skeptical commentators like me. And his persona is a fraud. I do hope to have a conversation with him about all this. He's not an honest actor and not a balanced actor in this space. Thank you guys for watching. Just wanted to protect my reputation a bit, and I'll see you next time.